Hello everyone, and welcome to Lesson 2 of Web Design. Last time we focused on HTML, which is what describes the content of a web page, and today we are going to be starting to look at CSS, Cascading Style Sheets, which is how we determine how our website actually looks. It's how we style the content that we create in HTML. So to start off, the first thing that you're going to want to do is to go to Replit. So again, I'm already logged in, but just to show you how this looks, I'm doing repl.it. And then here we'll go to log in. And you can click on the Google G to sign in. You should sign in with your Wheeler Gmail account. Once you've done that, you should end up at a screen that looks kind of like this. Again, you might have different things right here than I do, but you should see this little arrow next to a picture. Go to Student, click on 7th grade Tech Core or 8th grade, depending on which class you're in, and then go to A1 Making a Web Page. So this is the same lesson that you worked on last week, but if you keep scrolling down past Lesson 1, HTML Basics, you will find Lesson 2, CSS Basics. So each week I am going to be adding a new lesson to the bottom of this, at least while we're learning the basics. At some point I may give you a new assignment to start a new full website, but for right now this is what we're going to be doing. So take a second and get there if you haven't, and then we'll start talking about CSS. Now, some of you may have submitted your work last week by pressing the submit button. If that happens, you can click back into the assignment and press unsubmit and do unsubmit and edit so you can continue working this week. I left comments for a lot of you, and if you didn't receive any comments, it's just because I didn't see any issues. So you can go ahead and unsubmit if you submitted and keep working. Once you get to Lesson 2, we're going to go ahead and get started by walking through this lesson together. Our first goal for today is to learn where you can include code to tell your website how to look. There's a couple of different places you can add in CSS, and I want to make sure you know what all of those different places are and why they're useful. The next goal is to practice basic CSS commands so that you can add style to your page. Basically, we're going to start making your page look a little cooler. There's also going to be a link to today's video once it's posted. There's some terms right here. We have inline style, page specific, and internal style and external style sheets. I'll be going over all three of those things as we walk through the next couple of sections. Finally, we have our things to try section. So let's start with number 1. Same page, different style sheets. Go ahead and copy and paste this link. And I'm sorry it doesn't actually make a new page for you. You can't just click onto it for a link. Copy that, paste it into your browser, and it should take you to this website. This, I think, gives us a really good look at what CSS does. So this is a page with one set of CSS running on it. But if I click this button right here, so this is the same exact HTML. The only thing that's different is the CSS. So you can see, like, that's a pretty big change just by changing the CSS. And then if we go to Style Sheet 3, we can see a third way, and Style Sheet 4 a fourth way. And this is what the website looks with no style sheet. So this is really important. While content is definitely something that every website needs to have, what really kind of gives a page its character and its style is the CSS. So hopefully that gives you a better idea of what CSS does. Let's go back and see if we can try it out on our own. Before we do that though, we need to kind of understand what is in a CSS rule. So a CSS rule is essentially like the main part of how you write CSS code. And there's two things that it's going to have, a selector and a declaration. Right here, this image kind of breaks it down pretty well. So this is our selector. The selector is the thing that, the tag or thing that you are targeting. So this is selecting the H1 tag. So that is the tag that is going to experience changes. So in this case, this is my H1. So this CSS rule would be making changes to all H1s in my HTML document. Okay, so that's our selector. It selects which things it's going to apply to. And then we have our declaration. These are the actual changes of the style that is being applied. And each declaration is made up of one property and one value. So this property is like something like a color or a font or a background color or a height or a width. It's some property of H1. Then you give that property a value. So color, blue, size, like height, 50%, font, Arial. So the value corresponds to the color, the property, and they kind of make sense. Font size is our property, and the value of that property is 12 pixels. So hopefully that makes sense. An important thing to remember is that you always need a semicolon after you write that value, okay? If you want more on CSS syntax, as always, there's always going to be a link to a source. You can open that up if you want a little bit more information. So step 3 is to actually practice using inline style. So up here, this is one of our terms, is inline style. So inline style is CSS that is written right into the HTML tag. This method should be used sparingly. So if we look down here to our image tag, we actually already have some CSS, some inline style in our code. So right here, this style keyword tells the HTML, hey, this actually isn't HTML, this is CSS. So we're controlling the width, this is our property, and our value right here, 50%, and we have 2 of them here. So we are going to try this out in a slightly different place, and now you'll actually know that it's CSS. So we are going to start by adding a style attribute to the H1 tag that changes the color. Okay, so let's go up to H1. And then we want to add style equals, so just like we did here, style equals, and then this is our CSS part. We want to say color red, and then don't forget that semicolon, most common mistake on this. Something to notice is we don't have a selector here, right? This is our selector. We just have a property and a value because we are in line. This CSS is only going to affect this heading, okay? So let's press run. And now my heading has red. Another quick note is that if you want, you can also use Color Picker. So you can go to Google Color Picker and find a color you like. Let's say I want this pink, and I can copy that hex code, and instead of putting red here, I can put that hex code, because not all of the colors are going to be in here that you necessarily want. The basic ones are in there, and there's some beyond that, but a lot of times it's easier to just use that hex code. Don't forget to include the hashtag. Now you might be saying, okay, well, why do I need to have anything other than this? I can just go through and put style on every single one of my things. It'll be cool. But that takes a lot of time if you're having to put this into every single one of your lines. So the next thing that we are going to talk about is how to do internal style, which lets you affect multiple tags at once. For this, we are going to move up to our head. So this is our head. Remember, we have the open and the close, and it even highlights it for us to tell us where the close is. And inside of here, we are going to add a new tag, style. Again, we need to have this style keyword, the style tag, to tell the code, hey, this isn't HTML, this is CSS. And what we're going to be doing here is creating some style that's going to affect every single paragraph in this piece of code. Okay? So P, and then I'm going to change the color, and I'm going to make all of my paragraphs green. Easy peasy. Now I have my pink header and my green paragraphs, and all of the other text you'll notice is left alone because those aren't paragraphs. Those are list items. Notice that this more clearly lines up with our selector declaration model that's in the picture in number 2. Because now we have our selector, which is P, and then inside of our declaration we have color green. And you can add multiple declarations in here by putting them underneath each other. But for now, we'll leave this with just one. Now, the next thing to try is external style sheets. So these are ones that are in a separate CSS file. Now, part of the reason this is interesting is because once we move into our own CSS file, then we don't need to use this style keyword anymore because everything in the CSS file is automatically seen as CSS. And this CSS file is connected to our HTML file using this link piece of HTML. So that's really important that that's in there, otherwise this next step won't work. So let's go over to our index.css file right here. And now we are going to target our list items, li, and I'm going to make my color orange. So now all of my list items are orange. Okay. The next thing I want to talk to you about is the cascading part of cascading style sheets. So now we've practiced, we have our inline style right here, we have our internal style right here, and we have our external style. But something you might be asking is, what happens if I have all 3 of those for the same thing? So let's start with our list item. So right now, li is set to the color orange. Let's go back over here into our internal style and try making that color something different. I'm going to try making it blue right here. And you'll notice that our color stays orange. So what this tells me is that my external style sheet is kind of winning in this case. Let's see what happens if we put in something to control the color inline. So we can do style equals color. Let's do yellow. Don't forget that semicolon. And now we can see that this one right here, the one that I put the inline style on, is different. So this is important because using inline style helps us make exceptions. So it's really nice to have the internal and external CSS options because it lets you kind of control everything. So you can set kind of the standard for your page. All the paragraphs are this, all the backgrounds are that. But with inline style, we can make things a little bit more specific. And if we have an exception to one of our rules, right, they're called CSS rules, then we can change that. We can make that exception by using a little bit of inline style. But like I said, you don't want to have to go through and put style in every single itty-bitty little tiny line of your code, and so that is why the other 2 types of styles are nice. One reason you might use an external style sheet over an internal style sheet is eventually this section, if you do an internal style sheet, is going to get really, really, really long. And it's nice to have that in a separate file and you can just go back and forth. Okay, so from here, let's move on to background color. And what I want you to do is use an external style sheet to change the background of every different thing that you have in your web page. In the end, it should look a little bit something like this. It kind of looks like a crazy mess, but I promise you there's a reason I'm having you do this. So let's go over to our index file. And the way that I change background color is doing background-color. So let's start with our H1. So H1, background, and again, I'm going to use my arrow keys to go down to there, and then I'm going to set the background color to pink. And now I can see my H1 has a background color that is pink. Now, I could just do H1 and then do H2 separately, but there's also a way where I could say, well, I want all my headings to have the same background color, so I can do comma, H2, and then it's going to select both H1, all H1s, and all H2s. So let's run that, and now we can see that they both have that pink background color. Now let's look back at our code and see. We have H1, H2, oh, let's do paragraphs. So paragraph, background dash color, and let's make those yellow. Let's run that. There you go, that looks good. And then we'll go down, and our next thing is UL. Okay, so our UL, I think I set that to lavender. And not all colors will appear, and again, you're welcome to use that color picker to choose more interesting colors. Let's run that. So now I see that my background color is all lavender. And the next one I'm going to do is my OL, and I'm going to make that light blue. Notice that it's all one word. Okay. And now let's do LI, and you should see something interesting happen. So now my background color is, I think I did light green. There we go. So you can see where the OL kind of ends, that's the OL's territory, and before, so if I delete this, it went all the way across. But once we add in this rule about LI, that overlays it. So it's important to see how that structure works. Okay? And let's see, I think that actually, we need our image. So if I do image, and I want my background color to be red, you'll notice I don't actually see any background on there. And we'll talk about what's happening there next lesson. Last, let's do our A tag, our anchor tag right here. Again, you can be looking through your code to find this if you'd like. And let's do background color. And let's make it, what color did I make it? Oh, this one I made red. Okay. Okay, there we go. So now everything has its own background color. You don't have to match my colors exactly, but I just want you to practice adding backgrounds and playing with different things. Now I can also do things to something like my body. I can say, if I want, I can add a background color for my body and make it, oh, what color haven't I used yet? Brown. Again, you can look up more creative colors. Oh, okay, that's a little bit of a reddish brown. But right now I can see my body. You can even do one for like the entire HTML area. But the important ones that I want you to get are all of those image, LI, OL, the things inside of our body. So the tags from here to here. So go ahead and practice that if you haven't yet, and feel free to add some more HTML content to your page as well. And next week we're going to talk about how to kind of like organize your website and make things so that they have the right spacing and the setup, and we may even jump into things like adding columns or buttons. So I will see you all soon. Bye.